In a land where guilt, pain, sin, and suffering are now physically manifested, what are you going to do? And what will it take to stop the horrors of the church? This is Blasphemous. When I first sat down to play Blasphemous, I was excited to see which of the two types of games I was about to play. To me, Blasphemous was either about to be the most metal Castlevania I'd ever play, with its over-the-top, gruesome imagery, rock cover, and medieval combat, or a very specific, very directed critique of the Catholic Church that was so heavily inspiring the world it existed in. In the end, it was partially both. The game does take great inspiration from Castlevania, as well as Dark Souls in seemingly equal proportions. It relishes in its world design, tone, and combat to back it up. And for some of you out there who think that I'm digging too deep, the dev's slogan on their website is literally meaningful indie games. So there's a point. As far as I can surmise, the point of Blasphemous is to critique the Catholic notion of penance through pain. Blasphemous takes place in a world called Civistodia? Cavastodia? That. The world features a church that is heavily inspired off of the Spanish Catholic Church during the Spanish Inquisition. The world kicks off in a new direction after the miracle happens. Essentially, a very young child asks to experience the pain equal to his sin or the guilt of his sin. He is then ripped apart, becoming a living tree. This historic moment sets about an entire obsession with painful penitence. Pilgrims now walk bent over and bound, their whole body focused on the one goal to keep moving and stare at the road. Flagellation becomes commonplace, and the miracle slowly begins to manifest without the intent will of the people. Some see it as a plague, and rightfully so. Various item descriptions describe horrific scenes of pleading or begging for forgiveness as the miracle transforms them. Some are turned to stone, while others contorted into horrific tree people, a soul trapped inside their own body. The explanation by the church: the miracle is punishing them for their sins. They even begin forcing people to follow their pilgrimage. There's actually an entire area of the game in this prison with madmen who have been bound and blinded for whoever knows how long. Even the main character's design seems to follow up the idea of penance through pain. His hat, commonly referred to as a caparot, is a medieval symbol of penance. Worn during the Spanish inquisitorial times, it was often put on sinners during Easter as a sign of their penance. But this symbol of penance is laced with spikes and thorny metal, and a skull in the middle, seeming to indicate more pain associated with penance. The general concept of penance is that a person is acting out their plan or an action in order to show God that they are remorseful for their sins. Some Catholics believe that you can do this through self-infliction of pain, based on a Corinthians verse shown here. The reason they feel the need for this penance is out of a form of guilt, which brings us to your sword. Your sword is actually born of guilt, named mea culpa after the last words of the woman who created the sword. It's actually shown in the beginning of the game as she's praying mea culpa, or an acknowledgement of guilt. The statue of Jesus that she's beating herself with proceeds to turn into a ginormous thorn sword, and the miracle transforms her to stone. The church in overall doesn't understand the miracle, and is actually terrified of it. So instead of letting everyone know that, they hide the statues of the dead they don't want you to see in the forbidden rooms with blankets hidden over the statues, and the basement of the Mother of Mothers, the central cathedral. The game follows you, the penitent one, on your quest for penance. You use your thorny guilt as a tool to plow through those who are unholy and unworthy, or to prove that you have been afflicted with the miracle's true signs. Before you can get into the Mother of Mothers, you have to beat 3 different bosses, each of which give you a holy wound of attrition, a perfect sign that you have actually learned from your guilt. You then ascend to the top of the Mother of Mothers, where you kill the last son of the miracle. The game then splits into 2 endings. In one, you try to ascend to heaven, becoming yet another empty helmet of those who have gone before you, because you didn't let the miracle affect you enough. Instead, you foolishly ventured on, ridden with guilt, and perished. The alternative ending requires a bit more work, and you have to wander the world, destroying guilt statues. The guilt statues were actually used in the game to alleviate your guilt. So in other words, instead of casting your guilt off on others, you have become a master of your guilt, accepting true penance, and fighting your way all the way up to the boss, where upon beating him, you ascend up into heaven and become yet another son of the miracle, another worshipped and adored figure that alters the course of history forever. But no matter how much you alter it or shift its influence, the terrible cycle of the miracle continues nonetheless. The game pitches these notions of flagellation and Catholicism in a depressing and negative manner at every turn, furthering my belief that they are critiquing the idea rather than exalting it. The alleviation of pain is a common mechanic that happens throughout the game. In order to gain more maximum health, you have to find this ginormous woman who has been stabbed 6 times, and each time you relieve a dagger, you are ending part of her pain, enhancing your maximum health. There's an entire quest line which is dependent on whether or not you alleviate the pain of this tortured woman who has been lashed for years on years, over and over and over again, as the priest would stare on in awe and wonder at her endurance. Various NPCs seem to almost be the Grimm brothers levels of fairy tales, or, to put it better, an Aesop fable as a forewarning to some. There's the pilgrim, who stumbles along his journey, unable to get to any destination without requiring help from some nearby individual. Just a worthless person who has constricted himself so much with trying to be a pilgrim that once he gets to the end, he still doesn't understand his purpose, and lying at the feet of the first pilgrim, cries in desperation, "What do you want from me?" There's the priest who watches the woman who's being beaten, which, upon alleviating her pain, will lead to his realization that how screwed up it is and a potential ending where he commits suicide. The alternative is that you stop his suicide, nurturing him to a place where he becomes a member of a counter group to the church who buries and honors the dead. Altas gracias, which is Spanish for either high thanks or thank you, is a monster that the miracle combined 3 abandoned brides who wail up at the ginormous Baal, Jondo, their voices to be heard throughout the world, and still others see your act of challenging the last son as an act of blasphemy and seek to stop you. Despite having very clear metaphors at some points, other aspects of this game are completely lost on me. After hours of pouring through lore, trying to do research for this video, I still have so many questions to important aspects of the story, let alone basic questions about the structure of this world. For example, who is Joe Sereno and what is his meaning? Why are the babies born of the moon put in cages, and what does it mean to be conversely born of the miracle? What is the dream and its other side? And what about the miracle allows people to endure such torture? Despite their poetic nature and the fact that they are alluding to something, I can't seem to figure out exactly what they mean. For instance, why is there a baby in the basement with a wicker mother? What does he mean? Why are there people trapped in paintings? Why is there a floating giant who stabs herself? What do the bosses represent? I have a sneaking suspicion that the devs were running behind and cut content to put into their sequel, which will explain some of these questions, but that's yet to be determined. I feel like there are other metaphors this game presents that aren't explained enough to make a clear decision, and they end up feeling like a Silent Hill moment, where it's prone to numerous theories and debates, collapsing into true and authentic meaning. Despite this fact, I would say that the game is absolutely worth $25. I got around 22 to 24 hours of gameplay out of it, and I have yet to get all of the achievements. So, in an almost 1-for-1 hour to dollar ratio, it's a pretty good price. The game features fantastic medieval combat and an interesting platforming system. I'm not entirely the biggest fan of it, but I get why they were intentional in how they chose to do it. Either way, I think this game is definitely worth your time and money, and I can't wait to see what people think of it moving forward. Thank you so much, and have a good day.